Scars and Spikes, Sydney and Henry with you as well, Henry, this is usually a match reaction show under normal circumstances, but we thought that we'd get on to kind of wrap up the news of the day and give us sort of our take on it, as well as take a look at maybe some of the candidates that might be available for Atlanta United. Of course, if you've been living under a rock, or unless you've been living in Iraq, you know that Atlanta United has fired Ronny Deila after one season, after the worst season in club history, and now a third Henry's coaching search in the last 4 years is about to get underway.
It's unfortunate that this is where we are, like you said,
Yeah.
the third coaching search in 4 years. But it was a necessary step. I think we can kind of agree on that this, as you said, was the worst season in club history, despite unprecedented spending, despite a roster that seemed very well constructed, and in a season where the tactics and the identity of the team never really surfaced, and there was no real clear idea of what the team was trying to do. So yeah, I think it was ultimately the right move, and now this offseason has just gotten much more interesting because now there's this manager search going on, and obviously it can't take as long as the last one did. You would assume that they try to move this quickly, and we'll get into it a little bit, but there is a belief that this search will be much quicker.
Right.
And we're talking like a matter of you know a week to days is what I've been hearing, but we'll see.
I mean, you got to move fast, right? Because you have roster decisions to make. You have decisions to make on, who's coming back next year, who's not coming back next year. And I don't think you can afford, and we've talked about this on the show before, I don't think you can afford, right, to wait as long as, well, not wait as long as Atlanta United did last time, but I don't think you can afford to, take as long as they did last year, right? Because all this is you have to make. You want your coach to shape this roster. Another pivotal window we joke about, it's 2 to 3 more windows until this team becomes competitive. No, I feel like this is the window, and you need to get this hire right. And no, you can't mess about. You can't mess about. You can't, again, take a long time to get this going. So you got to move fast, like you said, Henry, and get somebody in here quickly. So we won't really rehash a lot of what you've heard already. I know Tommy and Tyler did their reaction podcast. So go to the Scarves and Spikes YouTube channel, listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart. If you missed that, they go pretty in depth on the decision. They give their kind of take on what they foresee is next for Atlanta United. But Henry, I figured we could chat about maybe some of the candidates that could be in play for Atlanta United. And one big one, Doug Robertson is reporting that Tata Martino is interested in the Atlanta United job. Of course, he's been linked to LAFC, has had a good working relationship with Chris Henderson. Things ended not in a great way between him and the club, mainly due to Carlos Bocanegra, but it sounds like, at least for now, and we're just speculating here, but at least for now, it sounds like he is maybe the favorite. And I mean, if you're looking to move quickly, if you're looking to make a move in pretty short order, I feel like you could really do a lot worse than Tata Martino. So I feel like he's kind of the name right now if you're an Atlanta United fan, right? Or is there another name that Atlanta could be keen to go after, do you think?
You said it. Tata Martino is absolutely the name if you're Atlanta United. Tata has to be the top target, I would say. And honestly, I'm surprised, going on social media and even in our Discord, some folks saying that they actually don't want Tata to be the next manager. And I get that, maybe some people are disenchanted by, I guess, the nostalgia that the Miguel Almiron re-signing brought, and maybe they're like, maybe the same thing happens with Tata. Like, are we sure this is the right thing to do? And for me, it comes down to a couple things. First of all, Tata Martino, he checks all the boxes that you're looking for. He is a manager who has experience winning in MLS. With Atlanta, he obviously won MLS Cup back in 2018. With Miami, people will say, "Oh, well, he had Messi and co during that season." Keep in mind, Messi only played, I think it was like 15 games that season,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
But beat the points record, won the Supporters Shield. Uh, yeah,
What happened in the playoffs, though?
that's a point, absolutely. But the point is, I mean, he led them to that title, to the League's Cup title in 2023. So he knows how to win, and he knows how to build a winning team, and he knows how to instill an identity because he was, let's face it, he was the architect of the Atlanta United, the original Atlanta United
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
He knew what players he wanted to bring in. A lot of the big guys signed on because Tata said, "Hey, I want you to be a part of this." We're talking, that's Miggy especially. Joseph was a part of that as well. A lot of these guys from South America were
Yeah.
folks that Tata really had an eye on, and he had an influence in bringing them in. The other thing is, Tata's a world-renowned name, right? He he has so much experience, and his resume is just, it's massive. And so when you have a guy like him at the helm, it
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier for you to sell the idea of players coming here, right? Especially better quality players, because they're like, "Oh, okay, I want to play under Tata." A lot of guys right now that are in what would be their prime age, that are, quality players, they know who Tata Martino is, and they
Yeah.
would want to play for a manager like that. And so,
Sort of like college football, Nick Saban, that's how Alabama got good because people wanted to play for Nick Saban. I mean, not like for like comparison, but sort of the similar effect, I
but it's
guess.
the same idea. And so that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? That effect, the fact that he knows how to build a team, and he knows how to identify talent, and that is what Atlanta needs right now, is to build the identity, to build the roster, to kind of aid in that aspect. He's worked with Chris Henderson before in Miami. They worked well together.
Yeah.
So that should work pretty seamlessly, and they can figure that out. But at the end of the day, I think that is a way to ensure a longer term success. First of all, set up the team to be competitive, but then when we're looking at a long term vision, I think this is the best way to ensure that this team is competitive for years to come.
It's the only coach you've had in Atlanta United's history that has had consistent success. I mean, other than Frank DeBoer, but at the same time, they crashed out of the MLS's back tournament, but DeBoer at least won you a couple of trophies, right? But when you look at Tata Martino, the body of work that he's put in, of course, MLS Cup 2018 really set the table for 2019 US Open Cup. Uh, his recruitment of Miguel Almiron. Actually, Miguel just said, "Hey, Tata's here," and Tata called him up and said, "Hey, you want to play for me?" He said, "Yeah." What's the phrase that Miggy said to Tata before when he agreed to come to Atlanta? What was it? Do you
I honestly
remember?
don't
Oh
remember.
yeah, we'll have to look up.
Uh,
It's a Spanish phrase. It's a Spanish phrase. We'll have to look it up. But he said, "I'm with you," and the rest is history. But yeah, he's again, he's had proven the success here in Atlanta. He's had success in Miami. Yes, Messi. Yes, Suarez. Yes, the Galacticos. But you have to find a way to get those guys playing together. You have to get the best out of the players outside of those four, right? And he did a great job of that. Of course, the playoff run, we kind of laugh about that. It's sort of a black mark, but I feel like if there were 29 teams in MLS who needed a head coach, a lot of them, probably all of them, would be lining up to hire Tata Martino. He knows the league. He's coached in the league. He has that championship pedigree that Garth Lagerwey had said in the past that he wants. He's won MLS Cup. And yeah, like you said, he's a well-renowned name. He's been able to recruit players to his cause. And the only thing I worry about is his age and his longevity. He was with Atlanta 2 years. He was with Miami 2 years. Mexico, he was sacked. I mean, well, that's Mexico, but he's not stayed around a long time at his 2 previous stops in MLS. So that would be my only concern. If you're trying to keep him here long term. Other than that, I'm on board. I really am, and I just worry, is it just kind of a nostalgia side? At worst, it's a PR move to help get fans back in the building next year. But at best, it could really set your club up for success and really get the club back to where it was, right?
And I think that's really what you need. Look, we could talk about how long Tata's going to be here or whatever. Uh, that, it's hard to say. Last time out, he left for reasons, as you said, he left partially because of disagreements with Carlos Bocanegra and, what the roster building situation was, kind of their relationship in that sense. That was one of the main reasons he left. And then in Miami, it was a personal matter that he had to go attend to.
Yeah.
So in both situations, it's not like he just said, "Oh, 2 years are up and I'm out." He didn't do that.
Yeah.
It was, other circumstances. And I think if you bring him here to Atlanta again, and the conditions are laid out and they agree, right? Okay, Tata, here is what you will be able to do. Here's the freedom that you have. Here is what ultimately Chris or Garth will have the last say on. Like, just iron everything out and make it crystal clear so that there's no disagreements down the line. I don't think he has a reason to be upset and just up and leave, in 2 years. Even if that does happen, look, what you want right now is someone who can get you on your feet, because right now, this club, this team, the problem starts with the culture. The problem is that there are several players, like there's no clear identity of how this team wants to play. There is a split. There are some players on this team that seem to be more adapted to a counterattacking, a quick style of play, and then there's others that seem more adept to like a more slow build up. And you have to figure it out, right? You have to sort that out. And I think if Tata is even here for 2 years, that is enough to sort the roster out. That is enough to uh, create kind of that championship, bring back that championship DNA or competitive DNA that Atlanta United used to have. And even if he does leave in 2 years, then it's pretty simple to kind of go and get some other coach of similar pedigree, whether with MLS experience or outside, foreign experience, and bring them to this club, and they will be set up to succeed rather than have to kind of build everything from scratch. So that would kind of be my argument for Tata, is that
Right.
he's the one that can kind of build that. And even if he's not here for the long term, which I think he would be here longer term this time around, because there wouldn't be a reason for him to leave necessarily unless something comes up like that. And at least he'll be able to build that foundation for you to create routine, perennial championship contender.
Yeah, Matt saying in the chat, even if Tata is here only 2 years and gets the club back on track, that's what I agree. I mean, 2 years good under Tata is better than 2 years bad under some other manager, or but I feel like that's sort of the only drawback, and it's not really a drawback, I don't think. One thing I would like to see Tata do, Henry, that he didn't really do during his first tenure with Atlanta United, if he does come back, is work more with the younger players. I mean, we didn't see that too much when he was here the first time. Of course, Atlanta drafted Miles Robinson, and Miles never really got his opportunity until after Tata left. And of course, he developed to one of the top center backs in MLS, Miles Robinson. I want to see him work with the academy more. I want to see him give more opportunities to players like Luke Brennan. I mean, Luke's already getting opportunities as is, but I want to see Luke continue to get opportunities. I want to see players like maybe Dom Chong-Ki get opportunities, Will Riley get opportunities, Matt Edwards, so on and so forth. And whoever they draft in, the super draft, I think you'll have the second or third pick in the MLS super draft. So I want to see him work with the academy more, work with Atlanta United 2 more. Javier Perez work with his team, whoever ends up being the coach for the twos, whether Jose Silva comes back on a permanent basis. I want to see that relationship between him and the academy and the twos and that player pathway, that methodology program become a little more compatible, right? Because there are tremendous young players in Atlanta United system, and what's a complaint we give all the time, right? They don't have time with the team to develop. When they do develop, they're sold rapidly. When they do get opportunities, they're out the door the next chance you get, or when they build a little bit of value. I don't want to see that. I want to see players be in the vein of George Bello, be in the vein of Caleb Wiley, who developed in the academy, who got their time with the first team for several years, and then they moved on. But you can't just kind of not play them or play them sparingly and then not move on from them or move on from them, I should say. But I want to see that relationship pretty strong, or certainly much stronger than it was the first time he was here. If Garth Wagaway and Chris Henderson do elect to bring Tata Martino back.
And here's the thing: I think if Garth and Chris do decide to bring Tata back, there will have to be a lot of compromises in a lot of areas on some of their practices, and especially their kind of stance on U22 players.
Mm-hmm.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but ever since Garth took over, Atlanta United has not signed a U22 initiative player.
Yeah, they already had Mosquera,
That
and
was 3 years ago.
Ibarra's U22, right? No, definitely Ibarra's U22, Mosquera.
Yeah, and then Sosa, and then Ibarra and Sosa have been moved on. Mosquera is loaned, and he's probably also going to have his purchase option exercise once that loan expires in the summer. But
that's before Garth, to your point.
Exactly. This front office has been very averse to signing U22 players because they've been more focused on the prime age players and that model, and kind of they don't want to take the risk of signing a younger player with potential that may or may not pan out. And Tata is absolutely going to want to make those kinds of signings because his 2017, 2018 teams, they depended on, young, early 20s players. We had,
South American.
Miggy and Franco Escobar and a lot of these guys who were in their early 20s, who were young and South American. And that's the other thing. They're going to want to, he's going to want to dive really into that South American market that he knows a lot. So I think that is a good thing. I think this club needs U22 signings and younger players, especially if we're talking about attackers. I think the younger, the better, because frankly, the faster they are, the more explosive and dynamism you have up front. I think that will benefit this team a lot more. And yeah, I think it also, it is kind of just a different in South America, it's just live different soccer, and it means something completely different. And that's not to say that like here or anywhere else it means less, but it's just different in South America. And there is so much talent that comes out of South America that just not diving into it wouldn't make sense. So I think that's a positive change. If Tata comes in and kind of tells them, yeah, we got to look into these young South American players and try to activate that U22 initiative as much as possible.
Yeah, and I want to kind of address what you're talking about the U22s and all of that. But I want to hit on this quote from Embo or Master in the chat. Talking about Mascherano's performance with the club, with not the same exact roster, but a very similar roster. 65 points in the regular season under Mascherano, and then of course 74 points under Tata Martino, winning the Supporter Shield, breaking the all-time points record at MLS. And that, to your point, Henry, like you said earlier, that was without Messi available for a good chunk of that season, right?
So Messi played a lot more games this season. And then halfway through the season, you get Rodrigo De Paul, who, theoretically improves your team by quite a bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So it kind of addresses your point that you're making between or making about Tata and what he did with Inter Miami during his 2 years there. But to your point about younger players, U22s, I definitely hope that, and I've mentioned this before, I hope that Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson become a little more flexible on this prime aged players philosophy. I think Tata, to your point, will definitely want to be that as well. I that's not to say they will never sign a prime age player as long as he's here, if he does come here. But I want to see some flexibility. I want to see some leeway as it pertains to that. I can't remember who I was reading that talks about Garth Lego. He's sort of risk averse. He doesn't like to, well, not, that's probably a wrong thing to say, doesn't like to take risks, but he's very hesitant to take risks because it could easily blow up and be the wrong move. I think that's part of why he didn't hire Rob Valentino. I think that's part of why he prefers prime age players because they have a greater track record of success, for lack of a better term. But I think that's part of why he's not obviously against the idea 100% of U22s. I think that's why he's a little bit hesitant to sign them because there's a risk that he can bring in a young player that is a total bust.
I think that's where your scouting and analytics
Yeah,
has to come in,
yeah,
right? And that's another
that's true.
department that, we may or may not see some changes in this offseason. The scouting team has been pretty much the same one since about 2020, 2019. Very little change in that area. And that kind of covers the time frame that Atlanta United has been a mediocre to bad team in MLS. And so that, I mean, if we're talking about, Arthur Blank in his letter mentioning that, things have to be better, that it's something that you have to change, I think would have to be that department. And I think we'll see some changes. But if that area is up to snuff, then you shouldn't have to worry too much about, is this player like a big risk to sign? Are we sure we want this guy? Like, if your analytics and your scouting are top notch, which they absolutely should be, given the resources that this organization has, then you shouldn't have to worry about that. And you can definitely go and get talented players like, LAFC. They managed to hit on a lot of their signings, especially the younger signings. Your David Martinez's and before that, Matty Bogush and these folks that you're able to bring in and they find success. Miami, they go this offseason, they get Telasco Segovia, Baltasar Rodriguez, a lot of these guys. Some of them maybe, because there's the joke that like Messi's soccer godfather is there helping to make the signings and whatever. And maybe that has to do with it.
Yeah.
But
at least they're signing them though.
Exactly. But they have people that are identifying the talent. And that's the thing that this organization, that this club needs is people, the right people to identify the right talent that this club needs to build a successful roster. And that comes down to whether your scouts are the right guys, whether they can get you the best players possible, and whether that team is it's made up of the right guys. That is the bottom line. And that's something that, some of the tough questions that Chris Henderson and Garth Lagerwey are going to have to ask this offseason.
And, Greg is in, on Saturday night after the match said, Atlanta does have to ask those tough questions. And that's certainly one of them. I think, just real quick, as we kind of move toward the next few candidates maybe that we want to talk about, I think Tata is going to demand that. I think Tata is going to come in and say, we need to really improve our scouting. We need to open things up. And whether that means sacking, Jonathan Spector, who's been here for a while, and getting some fresh eyes on the operation, you may have to make that move, unless you've made it already and it just hasn't been announced. But scouting recruitment has been a very weak point for Atlanta United over the past few years, and the team has suffered for it. But at the same time, I think Garth Lagerwey has to be more willing to take risk, right? You can't just die on the hill of prime age players. I've mentioned that before. Maybe manager like Tata will kind of help push him in that direction, right? But you know, if it isn't Tata, if it's another manager, I think to a larger point, he needs to take risk. He needs to not be afraid of, hey, this might not work out, and I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm not saying that's his thinking, but he needs to be willing to, bite the bullet and say, hey, this may be a risky move. This may, you know, not be the way I always do things, but if the risk is worth it, or if the risk is worth the reward in the end, definitely take that risk. So I imagine, to your point, Henry, like you said earlier, there's going to be very quick movement because, again, you need to make roster decisions and you need to bring a number of players in. I know Deila said 3 or 4 pieces. I mean, he's gone, so I don't know if the club, I don't know if Garth and Chris certainly agree with that, but they do need some pieces at least. I think we can all agree on that. We're going to talk about a few other names that might be worth, at least, I don't want to say in the mix, but worth contacting for Atlanta United. But want to bring up scarfsandspikes.com. Obviously, we'll be covering the coaching search from start to finish. If we catch wind of anything, we'll report on scarfsandspikes.com. We have content from all throughout the day related to the coaching search and more to come, certainly. So please bookmark scarfsandspikes.com. Please visit daily. News could come pretty fast. And outside of the coaching search, of course, is the transfer window and preseason and all of that. So scarfsandspikes.com is your destination for Atlanta United news, analysis, and opinion. Join us on Patreon, patreon.com/scarfsandspikes. There are 3 tiers. All 3 tiers get you access to our Discord channel, I should say. We'll be talking about Atlanta United and pretty much whatever is on your mind. It is the off season, and feel free to join us. It does help support what we do here at scarfsandspikes.com and the Scarves and Spikes podcast. Patreon.com/scarves and spikes. Also at scarfsandspikes.com is a link to our store. Get a hoodie, get a hat, get a mug. Cooler weather is around the corner, Henry, here in the South. So definitely get your Scarves and Spikes merchandise as another way you can help support what Scarves and Spikes does on a daily basis. If you're watching for the first time on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart. Leave a review, leave a rating. Let us know how we are doing. So, Henry, I wrote this list of names that could be worth checking out for Atlanta United. Tata is, of course, on there. I feel like he's your A1 candidate at this point. That being said, I want to kind of run down this list and want to get your pros and cons on each. So let's start with Gio Savarese, MLS 360 analyst, and MLS en Espanol analyst for MLS 360. And of course, we know from the Gio Hour on MLS 360 English. But here's a guy who has had success in Portland. Of course, didn't make the playoffs for a couple of years with the Timbers, but led them to 2 MLS Cups. Did a good job with the club during his time there. That being said, is he willing to, I guess, make the changes needed to get over the line? He hasn't won a big game. I feel like that's a knock from his time at MLS. He was never able to win the big game. Of course, 2018 was against Atlanta. 2021 was against NYCFC. So maybe that's a check against him to, or a case against him, I should say, to bring him in. He said he'll be in the larger market too. He'll have resources that he didn't have access to when he was in Portland. So I feel like there's a case for and a case against. He's been out of the league for a few years, so that's maybe a case against as well. And again, like I said, hasn't won the big game and maybe suffered from a tactical standpoint during the latter portion of his tenure with the Portland Timbers. So I guess what are your thoughts on Gio Savarese and the potential of him possibly being a candidate for Atlanta United?
I don't hate him. Obviously a guy who has won an MLS Cup and a guy who has led Portland to 2 finals is obviously someone that, well, 3 finals, has to be
Yeah.
someone that's highly regarded. Uh, I believe they also won the dumb, like, MLS's back tournament,
Most Hector, yeah.
but, I'm not really counting that because it's a weird
Yeah.
tournament,
Yeah.
but sure, it's technically silverware right there. Um, so, I mean, he knows how to lead a squad, and it's not like Portland is one of those teams that goes and spends a whole bunch of money, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it is that is something to consider as well, that he kind of worked with what he had and made it work. And yeah, he was able to depend on the legend of the game like Diego Valeri, top player like Sebastian Blanco, and many more. But I think he I think the major downside of him is that he has kind of been out of the game for the past, what, like 2 years at this point? Is it more than that?
Yeah, last couple of years. Yeah, you're right.
So
Because he was
I don't
fired
know.
toward the end of 2023. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know. The league has changed so much
Yeah.
since then, and I don't know. Maybe it's harder to kind of adjust to what this league is now. Also, there is kind of the question of, okay, he coached a Western Conference team. How's he going to do with an Eastern Conference team many years later? And I would argue this is probably the hardest conference in MLS
Mm,
history, the
yeah.
one that the Eastern Conference that we have right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can adjust to that is my worry. So while not the worst possible candidate, I'm iffy on him.
Yeah, I wish we could talk to him, Jake Zevin, and get his thoughts because Jake, of course, called Portland Timbers games for years before Apple TV took over. I'm sure he knows Gio Savarese very well. So kind of wish we had the opportunity to chat with him. But to your point about Valeri's tenure predated that of Savarese. He got with the club, or he joined the club before Savarese did. And then Blanco, I believe, joined around the time that Savarese joined Portland, and of course left at the end of 2023. And then if you look at Valeri, he left in 2021. So maybe there's a little bit of correlation there as to why Savarese's teams sort of fell off toward the end of his time there in Portland. But I feel like you could do worse. You could do better, but I feel like he'd do a lot worse than Gio Savarese. I imagine with his contract with Portland running out at the end of 2025, he'll want to get back on the touchline. So I would like to see him, or I would keep an eye on him as far as other openings around the league. It could be Atlanta, it could not be Atlanta, but I think with that contract running out, he'll want to get back into coaching. Anything else on Savarese you want to touch on real quick, or
Not really. That's kind of covers it.
okay? Jim Curtin, and I know what Atlanta United fans are thinking right off the bat, and I get it. Um, the Union didn't play the best brand of football, the most popular brand of football during his time there, but it was pretty darn effective more often than not, I will say. Um, I feel like there's a lot of tension between him and the ownership as far as how much money Portland or Philadelphia was spending that led to his sacking um, in 2024 after missing the playoffs. The only time they've missed the playoff under his tenure. So I feel like that's a bit of a shocking move for Philadelphia Union fans. But like Savarese, he's under contract. I think his contract, Henry, runs out 2026. So I think that's why he's been turning down teams. He turned down the Reds. He turned down Atlanta United reportedly last year. Here's the thing about Curtin. He's worked a lot with younger players, probably more than maybe other candidates that Atlanta United may be going after. He That might have been out of necessity because the club wasn't really willing to spend a whole lot of money, but he has tremendous experience with him. Quinn Sullivan, Mark McKenzie, the Aronson brothers, go on down the list. Some of them on the team to this day, especially Quinn Sullivan, and we know what his talent is. But Curtin has had youth experience, and yeah, Atlanta fans don't like him because he sort of rubbed them the wrong way. But if he wins, I mean, all will be forgiven. Now, the flip side of that, on the flip side of that, though, if he doesn't win, he's going to get a very short leash. I feel like fans are going to want him out quicker than they would another coach. Is my thought. But I guess what are your thoughts on potentially a Jim Curtin joining Atlanta United? Good move or bad move in your eyes?
I think, look, Jim Curtin is a manager who, for the better part of a decade, made Philadelphia one of the better teams in the league. So that obviously that is a huge credit to him and how he was able to kind of organize that team. And
Yeah.
the Union is an organization that's not used to spending a whole lot of money, right? I mean, their biggest signing this season was Bruno Damiani for $3 million. So, and
And
they
they
won
ended
the
up winning the
Supporters
Shield,
Shield.
yeah, in spite of
So,
that.
so there you go. And Jim, right? He did a good job with Philadelphia,
Yeah,
and he got
yeah.
them, a Supporter Shield win. I think it was 2020.
2020 COVID
Yeah,
season, yeah.
COVID season. Sure, it's a weird
Their
season.
first
That's a
trophy.
criticism,
Yeah,
but 2022 got him the MLS Cup, and they were a Gareth Bale last minute goal away
yeah,
from winning MLS Cup for the very first
yeah,
time. It was a machine. What Jim Curtin had with Philadelphia, and maybe his style of play is a little boring defensive is what I've heard, but it's effective. And
yeah,
I think fans, if they see results, they'll be satisfied, even if it's not necessarily like, oh wow, tiki taka, amazing soccer. Like, I think if Jim Curtin can come here and deliver titles, that is the main thing. And also, a point that we were talking about earlier was, the importance of integrating academy kids and
yeah,
using, that pipeline as much as possible. Well, Jim Curtin really used young players to a great effect in Philadelphia, and obviously Philadelphia, their academy is arguably one of the, arguably the best in the country. So
mhm,
uh, it's not that hard when they're producing players like you mentioned, the Aronson brothers, the Sullivan brothers, Kevin Sullivan, and all these guys. Um, but Atlanta's starting to produce players like that too, and probably in the in the near future, I could see Atlanta producing more players of that quality. So yeah, I think that would be an advantage to him. The disadvantage, uh, like I said earlier, is probably just a style of play. I don't know if that
yeah,
is what fans want to see. I don't know if that is what this front office is trying to build, but obviously they seemed committed to Jim Curtin back in 2024 when that coach search was going on. So I guess they would be committed to him if he
yeah.
signed on this time around.
I was thinking, I don't know how much of the NCAA tournament you watch during college basketball season, but during like bracketology, they do this blind resume. Like Team A has this record and Team B has this record. Name the teams. I feel like if he kind of did that with Jim Curtin, he put his resume up and say, name this coach. I think people will be very happy with his resume. But then when you take away like kind of that piece of tape or whatever, and people find out it's Jim Curtin, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, are you kidding me? But I feel like it'll kind of have that same effect. But again, he has the experience, he has the knowledge, he has the success that you want in a coach. Hasn't won a trophy or won the Supporter Shield in 2020, like you said. Got to MLS Cup, like you said. But at the same time, um, yeah, you can't argue with the success that he had in Philadelphia. Is he a right culture fit for Atlanta United? I don't know. It- but he's a good coach, and I don't think Atlanta should turn their nose up at him. If he were willing, of course, like I said, he's turned it down before. We'll see what happens if Atlanta want to maybe reach out again.
Yeah.
Peter Vermees. How do you feel about Peter Vermees?
Oh man. Shoot. Well,
He's won trophies.
yeah, but how long ago?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
Look, the era of Peter Vermees winning trophies was, I would argue, it was a whole different MLS.
Yep.
The league has changed so much, and I just don't. I don't think that he can do it here. Yeah, it's hard for me to see that happening. Um, Obviously, he's a guy and a manager with a great resume, and
No.
a long time winner with Sporting Kansas City, but times are changing,
Yeah.
and the Eastern Conference is much, like I said, much harder, and especially now when you're competing against teams that have Lionel Messi, Evander, all these guys, Hani Mukhtar. Like, I'm just not sure that this is a team that he can take. And I
Yeah.
was going to say something similar about Jim Curtin, right? Because these are two managers, Curtin and Vermees. The similarity is that they've been coaching for a long time in MLS, and that they've had periods of success. But even Jim Curtin's era of success, it came to an end, right?
Yeah.
Last season, they missed out on the playoffs for the first time in a while, and that's when he was ultimately sacked. And it was a relatively kind of the same team that goes and wins the Supporter Shield this year. So it kind of speaks a little bit to maybe the tactics were getting stale, maybe something was going on behind the scenes. And I
Mm.
think something similar was happening with Sporting Kansas City. It's been a little bit more of a slow burn with them, though, because they've been on
Yeah.
like a slower decline. And then this season, it was really just like,
Yeah.
okay, we are screwed. Like, we need to
Yeah.
make some changes. And that's when they pulled the trigger on Peter Vermees. But yeah, for me, I just don't. When you have the managers, the other candidates that you have available right now,
Yeah.
to me, Peter Vermees doesn't really make sense.
They did bring in, Dejan Joveljic, and he had a good season with them in 2025. But a lot of turnover in that club, namely Johnny Russell, really the heart and soul of that club for years. I think Shallowy is there, Daniel Shallowy, but Shallowy is how old? I'm looking it up, but he's getting
It's like
to the
20
end of his
something,
career. Yeah, 29. So
29.
I mean, he's not an old player, but he's not a young player either. And I feel like he's approaching the latter stages of his career. So he has a few years left. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, Willie Agada, a really young, promising player. I think for me, he's too old school. And I think that's what did him in. He's been in the league forever. And I think you have to, the old saying is adapt or die, right? And I feel like Peter Vermees was not willing to adapt. The only thing is he worked in a small market, right? So he didn't have the resources that an LAFC or an Atlanta United or a NYCFC or Red Bulls could have given him. And I wonder what he would do with those resources. But I feel like from an overall standpoint, I think he might be too old school and might not fit the culture that Atlanta United is looking for. Another thing, too, he was, remember, the technical director of Sporting Kansas City. So he actually got hired as a technical director initially when they were the Kansas City Wizards, took over as interim head coach, and then just ultimately became the head coach for good, kept on the TD tag, technical director tag, until he gave up that job in January of 2024. So I think he would want a little more control than maybe a Tata Martino or a Jim Curtin would want from a roster building standpoint. So uh, that's one thing that I think will preclude him, since he won't have that dual role um, in Atlanta United, but he would still want a heavier say. But all in all, I think he probably is too old school and maybe not willing to adapt to the new times of MLS to be a viable candidate for Atlanta United. A couple of other names I want to throw out there for you, Henry. Remember, Patrick Vieira was a finalist reportedly for Atlanta United last year. He's at Genoa in Serie A right now, and Genoa, I think, winless through their first 7 matches. They drew Parma earlier today, but he's in a rough way with Genoa. But I mean, that's like apples to oranges, right? Calcio is a much, much different beast than MLS. But when you look back to see what he did with NYCFC, he had tremendous success. I don't think they ever finished lower than third when he was over there. And part of it, yes, might have been due to playing at Yankee Stadium and the advantages that NYCFC enjoyed there. But you can't argue with the success that he had with NYCFC. I don't know if it would be a bad idea if Atlanta United were to reach out to him again. He reached out to them last year just to say, "Hey, I'm interested," and I think he could do a lot worse than Patrick Vieira. Would he want to come back to MLS? I think he would. Would it be Atlanta United? I don't know, but again, he was a finalist, so I imagine that's still on the table. Only thing is, like I said, he's still with Genoa at this point, and I don't know how much longer he'll be there. I think he'll be sacked any day now, to be honest with you. But what do you think about Patrick Vieira?
Look, you mentioned that he did well in MLS with NYCFC, and he did. That
Yeah.
was back. What was his tenure like? 2017 to something like. I know he was back
Yeah.
way back in that day. I just don't
Uh-huh.
remember from where exactly, from what time frame it was. But in any case, sure, he had some success there. I don't remember how much time he was with them, but
But 2.5
he
years.
2.5 years.
2016 to halfway to 2018. Then he went to Nice.
Gotcha.
Mm,
But he doesn't really have a whole lot of trophies to show for it, honestly.
yeah.
That's my big worry with him, and especially you just mentioned that uh, you know he might be getting sacked by Parma,
Or Genoa.
or sorry, Genoa. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a great look when you've just fired your one manager for only winning 5 games this season, and then you go and get a manager who has just come from being sacked for not winning.
Yeah, but that's a totally different league, though. I mean,
It might
it's a
be,
pressure
but
cooker in Italian football for sure.
yeah,
They
no,
go through managers like like that.
but it doesn't inspire confidence, is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah,
if he could at least have like performed decently in Italy, given a respectable account of himself, but
sure.
I don't know. I don't feel comforted if that's the manager that's coming to kind of fix this club and bring it back to winning ways.
Yeah, and like I said, you could do worse than him, but yeah, like I said, with some of the other names, you could do better than him. But I don't know if it's not at least worth trying if you're Atlanta United. I mean, again, he was interested last year. He may be interested again. He's had a few stops, to your point, though, that have been less than successful. So certainly that could spook Atlanta in this case, but I feel like it didn't spook them last time. So yeah, interested to see if Vieira comes up as a possible name that could be hired for Atlanta United. What about a Bob Bradley? Just quickly, Bob Bradley. I don't think it would ever happen, right? I mean, it's
No,
too old school, too hard line. I don't think so. Gary Smith, no, right?
I don't
Nashville
think so.
SC's former manager,
I don't think
no,
so.
no. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Man United manager. He's wanted to coach in MLS.
Maybe.
Thing with him is he'll have to navigate MLS roster rules. I could see him getting frustrated with that.
Well,
So
I mean, look, if I think that's where like Chris Henderson and Garth Lagerwey can help because they
sure,
are much more familiar with that aspect of MLS, and if they can basically just come together and say, okay, these are the players we need. Here are kind of how we adjust to fit within the cap and the rules and all the dumb stuff that MLS has. Uh, Ollie worries about the on-field product. We worry about giving him a team,
yeah,
and just figure out that dynamic. I think in that sense, it could work.
yeah. I threw it out there as a maybe because again he wanted to reportedly reached out to Charlotte FC about their vacancy. Charlotte FC went, of course, with Dean Smith, and that's paid off for them tremendously. So I don't know. Maybe Ollie ends up somewhere. I don't know if it's Atlanta, but I think he will end up somewhere. Omer saying in the chat he'd go to LAFC first. I wouldn't be surprised if he were a candidate for LAFC, but I think maybe there's a world where Ollie is in MLS at some point in time. I don't know if that would be Atlanta. Lower rung candidates. I don't think Garth would do this, but there are young up and comers that he could go with. A Ben Pierman, with the Charleston Better. I know Gray has been a champion of him. Of course, Rob Valentino, you could give him a shot. But again, I think Garth is too risk averse to make those moves. I think if he didn't make the move last year, I don't think he would again. Or I think he wouldn't change his mind this year. And I can see where that's coming from a coaching standpoint. You don't want to hire maybe a first timer for a big job like Atlanta United. They already did that, of course, with Gonzalo Pineda, and that didn't work. So I feel like that's part of Gart's thinking there. But yeah, I think if you hire anybody, they've got to have experience, right? And MLS, they got to know the league. They got to have won championships, got to have won trophies. Garth has one of that championship pedigree. That's where he brought in Deila, who won MLS Cup, and of course, it didn't work out with Atlanta United, but I don't see that changing. And he definitely has this pick of possible candidates. Maybe a name that we haven't mentioned tonight during this episode. I don't know. But again, I feel like this will go pretty quickly. I mean, you can't afford to wait. You have a number of decisions you need to make on your roster that you need a coach to come in and sit down and say, hey, we need help here, 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 and here, right? So I think Garth and Chris Garth, I should say, learned his lesson from last time and saying, hey, we got to move quick to fill this spot. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely have to move quickly here. I just kind of looking at some of the dates for the off season roster building, options. Offers. Let me start over. Deadline to exercise options and bona fide offers November 26th. So that that's when we're going to start seeing like there's 13, technically 12 players because Brad's retiring. So 12 players to make decisions on whether you're going to pick up their options or you're going to let them go to free agency or the reentry draft or whatever it is. Those are decisions you have to make by then. Then comes the super draft, which Atlanta, kind of the blessing in disguise of finishing second to last is that you get a pretty good draft pick.
And they've had some success in the draft too.
Exactly. And Gray will tell you that there are some interesting players to go for in this draft class. So that is something to look at. And then obviously, what other needs does this roster have? What other, holes do we need plugged in, and where do we want to look to fill in those holes? Those are all questions that need to be answered quickly so that you have your roster mostly set up by the time preseason rolls around. You want the full squad there by preseason, just so everyone is there and they get the full preparation time. So, you want the coach in as fast as possible so that he can be involved in these decisions, and that way that person can say like, yes, this is who I could use in this type of system that I'm trying to implement, or no, or we need to move a little bit more in this direction. I think that's important. And I think the club has sometimes been a little backwards when it comes to that, maybe sometimes putting the cart before the horse in some respects.
Right.
But yeah, they need to do it right this time, because I feel like there's very little margin for error for this front office going forward.
100%. And just quickly, talking about the roster, of course, we don't know what the club is thinking, but I feel like you can make some inferences as to what kind of holes that Atlanta United is looking to fill based on sort of the tactical selections that have been made over the past few weeks here. So I think looking at that, you can sort of put two and two together as to say, okay, this is where Atlanta United wants to or needs to improve. This is where they'll look to hopefully get better at in 2026 and beyond. So the coach, again, will be a massive part of that. And this is a reputational hire too, just quickly, for Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson. More so Garth Lagerwey, because this is going on or this is now 3 seasons that he's been here, 3 full seasons that he's been here. I don't think he'll get another shot to hire a coach after this. So I think from a reputational standpoint, he's thinking of that. Certainly Chris Henderson maybe has a little more leeway, but from a reputational standpoint, he's sort of thinking of that as well. But this club cannot miss. They absolutely cannot miss. They are in a way that they've never been before from a on the field product. The fans aren't showing up. I mean, we saw it on Saturday, just so many empty seats, and it's just very bad for a club who has global ambitions and so many aspirations. So let's hope that at the end of the day, Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson hire a coach that can get Atlanta back to where it was and back to its glory days. MLS Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. We'll talk about sort of some of the decision day storylines that came out. And Henry, we're going to preview the wild card round of the MLS Cup playoffs. MLS Cup playoffs are just around the corner. Wild card round starting, or will be on Wednesday. It'll be Chicago versus Orlando first, and then Portland and RSL in the West Coast or in the Western Conference. And then this weekend, of course, this coming weekend, first round, and some intriguing matchups like Hell is Real in the Eastern Conference. That's pretty appealing. Charlotte, NYC, I think that's going to be a good series. Minnesota, Seattle should be pretty interesting. But there's a series of series that are very appealing that I'm excited to see. So we'll talk about that on MLS Monday. Hopefully you have a guest trying to find all these things. But yeah, looking forward to that. And then Wednesday, Henry, are you excited for our Waffle House episode on Wednesday?
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We have some stuff to talk about. I got a Waffle House like 5 minutes from my house. So
same here.
Probably be there.
Do you have your order in mind, or you still need time to think about it?
Yeah, I probably still have to think about it. It's been a minute actually since I've been in a Waffle House.
Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
I can taste the hash browns now. I can taste the waffles now. I'll have to think about what I want to order, but I will come to that decision in due time. So that should be fun. Wednesday, 7 p.m. on YouTube. Again, if you're watching for the first time, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Henry, where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at H.A. Higuita.
I am at SH Rice on X, SH Rice on Blue Sky, SH.soccer on Instagram and Threads. Follow us, Scarves, the letter N, Spikes on X, scarvesandspikes.com on YouTube, or scarvesandspikes.com on Blue Sky, Scarves and Spikes, Instagram and Threads, facebook.com/scarvesandspikes. Of course, support our show, support our coverage at patreon.com/scarvesandspikes. And of course, for all the latest Atlanta United news, analysis, opinion, and so much more, scarvesandspikes.com. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fun conversation, and there are plenty more conversations to be had about this team, and we will be there to cover it all.
Right.
We will be there to cover it all. Every single bit, Henry.
Every single bit?
Every single bit. We'll be there.
All right.
There's no off-season in Scarves and Spikes world.
Not at all. The fun's only just now getting started. This is where the real season begins.
That's right. It's a nice little slogan. Scarves and Spikes. This is where the real season begins.
Yeah. Silly season, that is.
Yeah. Well, serious season, based on what Brad Gazan said.
Maybe.
So there's going to be some serious conversations need to be had. So
that's right. We don't want to be too nice here.
See what you did there. Hopefully Atlanta isn't silly with the person they hire as head coach.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad if they mess that up.
I agree. Thanks everyone. See you soon.
See you guys.